What's up all you retro shiz loving dudes and dudettes, Toy Shiz here, and I got an awesome video for you today, this time being the 1995 Spider-Man the Animated Series Wave 7. Now this wave, as you can clearly see, is a lot different from most of the characters that we have seen. Not one of these characters, with the exception of maybe some armor here and there, actually ever appeared on the animated series itself. This is completely a comic book wave, and that's actually going to lead into the later waves that I will get to. There was only 7 official waves that hit with the original Spider-Man the Animated Series cartoon, and then they decided to go off into bug bombers and web splashers and everything else. We will get to those eventually. This was a weird wave for me because as a kid, I'm very much into Spider-Man the Animated Series. I knew who 2099 was. I knew who this new Ben Reilly costume Spider-Man was, and they were really hitting us over the head with that one. This also included a packaging change as well, which included Ben Reilly Spider-Man taking the place of Peter Parker Spider-Man, basically, but this was an animated show based around Peter Parker. It was madness, it was anarchy, it was definitely different, but heck, I still collected the heck out of them. So let's get into it. This is the Toybiz Spider-Man the Animated Series Wave 7. And while I got all you 2099s here, I just want to say thanks so much for checking out my Retro Shiz vids every week. If you like them, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment. Let's talk about some old toys. And for all you super Spider-Man fans out there, if you head over to your local Target store, right in the men's section, right in the t-shirts, I bet you're going to find this ultra cool, super new Spider-Man the Animated Series t-shirt. It's quite fantastic, and I love how it just syncs up with these recent videos, and also kind of sort of the 25th anniversary of this amazing cartoon. I highly recommend it. It's really cool. Go and grab one now. So first up is, of course, the brand new Spider-Man, which in the 90s, they had the whole maximum clonage story arc where they tried to say this is not Peter Parker, it is Peter Parker who's the clone. So we were left with Ben Reilly, who took over the mantle of Spider-Man for the time being, and then of course Peter Parker always goes back to being Spider-Man. With this new figure and this wave, they tried to capitalize on that, and for the most part, they did a pretty good job. It's not a bad Spider-Man at all. Very interesting, but of course, if you were a fan of the 90s cartoon show, obviously very confused, especially as a kid thinking, wait, are they going to institute this on the cartoon? What have you? Things like that. It was an odd choice, especially when changing the packaging from being the typical animated Peter Parker Spider-Man to now this Ben Reilly. Like most things, they were trying to just capitalize on the fact that this was the new costume. To be quite honest, they got this out pretty fast. It was probably a good 6-7 months, and that really, back in the day, was like a good year or two before you'd actually see some more modern characters in the comics. The costume was pretty good. Light blue. He had the wrist gauntlets on him, much like the Ben Reilly Scarlet Spider. He had articulation at the head, at the shoulders, at the elbows, kicked out, and he had knees with some of that new fancy ankle rotation. Again, not a bad Spider-Man. However, you did see this Spider-Man again, repainted, albeit, in the Maximum Clonage box set, which I have gone over as well. A little bit of a different spider on the chest. This one seems to be a little bit more thinner. This one's a little bit wider and fatter, and of course, dark blue as opposed to light blue. I actually like the light blue one better. As far as the accessories went, he took a cue from the previous wave's Nick Fury, and he got a repainted rocket launcher, basically, and he would clip just onto his back, just like this, and it would fire by twisting the knobs. He had black missiles instead of red missiles, so, you know, Toybiz reusing that, giving the old change up. And then he came with a rather wonky gun. Now, really weird, almost science fiction guns were not that uncommon in the Spider-Man the Animated Series, as they couldn't show a lot of violent tendencies. So this one is not too far out of the realm, but to give it to Ben Reilly for this Spider-Man is an odd choice. He did hold it well. It was a cool figure. It just really felt like the accessories were an afterthought. A nice figure, a nice Spider-Man, and I do recommend him if you can grab him. And next up, we have Rhino 2, or Rhino Unleashed, Armored Up Rhino, whichever you would like to call him. It was just the old-fashioned Rhino that we had gotten in a previous Wave 2 Spider-Man with some added extra armor to him. And again, I get it, it's a repaint, but one that wasn't that exciting. And to be honest with you, out of this entire wave, probably the least exciting because it's Rhino. He's already armored. Why would you need more armor? Now, this was a thing from the comic books. Very 90s, very cool thing to do. But like the previous Rhino, he's basically the same color. There is, in fact, a third Rhino that came with the Marvel subline that they did, and he's actually painted more of a brown. And then technically a fourth Rhino in the Spider-Man Venom Saga 4-pack exclusive, and it basically looks to be the same type of brownish Rhino color. But same exact figure, just the armored effects added. He still had the same gimmick. You'd push a little button on his back right here, and his head would go up in that pure Rhino fashion. These were all removable, so you could put these on, so that was an added thing. So you could get a basic Rhino figure if you wanted to, but then he would have all those peg holes. These have not held up well over the years. These are just standard, you kind of clasp them over his wrist, so that was part of the whole accessories, you would say. This one's fared better than this one. They are getting quite old, and they're not staying as well as they should, but then, of course, right here at the clasp, it's starting to wear down, and I don't want nothing to break on me. He came with two Flintstones type weapons, as I guess Rhino would, being that he has all the armor. Why not give him an axe and a prehistoric Mjolnir? He did hold the weapons quite well, oddly enough. It's just odd Toybiz choice. And this whole wave has very odd weapons, very afterthought-ish weapons, but painted nicely, very cool, very odd. Not one of my favorite Spider-Man figures, but equally just a odd end one at that. Now, back in the day, if you were a collector, a superhero collector, then more so you would know that superhero female figures, or just female figures in general, were not that easy to come by, not unlike today. Getting a female superhero action figure in any way, shape, or form always led to them being incredibly hard to find and just incredibly short-packed, because back in the day they felt like, well, boys don't want to play with girl-type action figures. We all knew growing up, you gotta have the girls on the team because they make it all that much better. This is Spider-Woman, the Jessica Drew version, of course. And while, again, she never appeared on the Spider-Man the Animated Series, it was still a really cool figure to have. Plus, it's Spider-Man related. So even if you didn't know who the character was, you're like, Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, I think I need another Spider-Man figure, technically, on my collection shelf. Again, before we get to the figure, totally random weapons. I mean, of course, you know Spider-Woman always has this type of gun and a spider shield. I could see this working a lot better, but with this, you're just left to wonder, huh? Why? And if you look at her hands, how is she going to hold this? She's got open hands. Well, they fixed that because you can kind of just slip her hand right through there. And what you would do is simply just fix this over the top of the gun. You could actually do it either which way if you wanted to. This one seems to go better. And then you would simply take her open hand, slide it right through that slot, and then she has a spider gun shield thing. And then, of course, she ain't going to be holding it anytime soon because it's so top heavy. But this Jessica Drew Spider-Woman was actually a really great figure. Great paint overall, nice hair sculpt on her. Articulation, not in the head, nothing moved. Shoulders at the elbows, kicked out, and she had knees. A nice bright red, nice solid yellow with some black accents. She was really great. And like the Iron Man animated series, that was on right around the same time, albeit it didn't last as long as Spider-Man the Animated Series. This Julia Carpenter Spider-Woman was the exact basis for this Jessica Drew Spider-Woman. The differences are merely just in the paint, but still two great figures. Both I highly recommend, especially this version of Spider-Woman. She looks fantastic. Now I know what you're thinking. You were probably going to say, well, Venom always has these weird alien creature hands, and no, you're wrong. At Toybiz back in the day, because these are the most wonky of the accessories that I've ever seen. They are just totally wild. This is the Stealth Venom from this wave, and while it's a really cool, interesting Venom, this stealth version has been remade almost in every iteration of Venom figures that you could possibly imagine. With these hands, alien hands, sculpts, I mean, they're wild and crazy, but they would simply just snap onto the top hands of the figure. And let's be honest, as a kid playing with these things, I never used those. Those were totally wackadoo. But it didn't detract that this was actually a very nice Venom figure. Interesting face sculpt, I will say. It's actually a reuse from the piece that you got with the Chameleon figure. But clear figures are always really cool. I mean, even the little black accents, the spider symbol everywhere around. And he had the Carnage effect from Carnage Unleashed, just as a simple wraparound symbiote piece on his waist. Articulation was at the shoulders, at the legs, and at the knees, and he had head rotation that worked kind of sort of. Mine has always been a little stuck over the years, so I've never tried to force it. And again, of course, this is a reuse of the Venom 2 body, chameleon head. You can see the obvious reuse right there. Oddly enough, this Stealth Venom would actually have a variant within the wave in which he still had the Stealth name, but he was painted black with still of a see-through color to him. I never saw that one in stores, and to this day, it's one that's eluded me, and I would still like to add that to my collection. But you can't go wrong with this Stealth Venom. I think you're going to like it, and I do highly recommend him. And finally, believe it or not, back in the day, Spider-Man 2099 wasn't as popular as he was in this day and age, thanks to recent video games and Spider-Verse type movies. But Miguel O'Hara made his triumphant, amazing Spider-Man debut for the animated series figure line, and he was awesome. This was the first figure that I knew I wanted when I saw the reveal for this new line. He looked so great. He has this cloth goods, spindly spider type cape coming off of him. This was just pure awesomeness. The spider skull painted beautifully, the head painted beautifully. By far my favorite one, the one that I had to have when I went to Toys R Us looking for this. And of course, this was one of those waves where in one fell swoop, I grabbed the entire set. They were just sitting there right on the shelf, and I couldn't have been more happy. The articulation was at the head, at the shoulders, at the elbows, kicked out knees, and he had that foot pivot. Now, the web cape would clip on via these old-fashioned, almost Kennerish type clips that would simply go over his wrists, the back of his neck, and then of course his wrist right here. It was very flowing, it was very fitting, it was an interesting way to do it, and it did make him look great. Now in 2099, I'm sure that's the only place that you can expect to find a flaming skull spider sword, which is the one that he came with. I got the yellow one. Apparently, and this was something I learned about later on, was that there was a white variant for this flaming sword. Interesting enough, I think I'll take the yellow one, to be quite honest, as that gives it more of the fire-ish effect. Why he had this type of accessory, no one really knows to this day. It's not a comic book thing. It's just like, you know what? Give him a giant axe. That makes it so much more 90s. But he held it well, and it was great. And then, of course, Spider-Man 2099 is always known to wield this giant futuristic rotating turret, whatever you want to call it, painted nicely, silver effects on top of black. Didn't have a way to really hold it, but if you wanted to, you could kind of unclip his cape right here, and then all you would do is simply finagle it onto his arm, giving him a flaming sword arm cannon combination. Now let's see about standing this guy up. He's going to join Jessica Drew. You could actually get it to work, but he's so front heavy, it's ridiculous. I love this 2099 figure. It's awesome. It's great. It's so totally Toy Biz 1990s. You gotta grab him. So that's going to do it for my Retro Shiz look back at Wave 7 of the Spider-Man the Animated Series by Toybiz. A very odd wave, to be sure. A lot of, let's say, reuse, you know what I mean? It's just, you could totally tell that they're like, oh, let's just throw a bunch of stuff in it. Accessories really make no sense. It's a bizarre wave, but it did give us some really cool characters and ones that are purely 90s, and let's be honest, come on, these still rock. These still are cool. It doesn't detract from the fact that none of these characters really appeared in the show except for Rhino, but he never wore that gear. And this is where all you guys come in. Which wave would you like to see first? Do you want to see the Spider Force or the Spider Wars, Spider Force, Spider Wars, Spider Force, Spider Wars? It's up to you. You tell me, you let me know in the comments below which wave do you want me to tackle next, and there might be a vehicle in it as well. Anyways, I'm going to leave you guys with that. As always, drink some great coffee, eat some great food, but most importantly, when you get an axe, make sure you have it set on fire and have a giant orange skull face in the middle. It'll make Ghost Rider jealous. And when you do, let me know what you found. I'll talk to you guys soon. Adios.